Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what happened 1 hour ago in southern Lebanon represents the single deadliest day for Israeli forces since the 1973 Yom Kippur War. What we are witnessing is not a skirmish, it is not a border incident, it is not an exchange of fire that will be contained through normal escalation management procedures. What we are witnessing is a coordinated, multi-layered Hezbollah counterattack that killed 535 Israeli soldiers in less than 6 hours, and the implications extend far beyond the immediate casualties. I am looking at casualty reports confirmed by multiple Israeli military sources, emergency services communications, and statements from the Israel Defense Forces spokesperson. What these sources show is not an ambush of a single unit. It is not an isolated attack on one position. What they show is a simultaneous assault on 11 separate Israeli forward operating bases in southern Lebanon, executed with a level of coordination, intelligence precision, and firepower that Israeli military analysts are describing as unprecedented in Hezbollah's operational history. In the next 22 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what Hezbollah did, how they achieved complete tactical surprise despite Israeli surveillance dominance, why the casualty count is so catastrophic, and what this means for the trajectory of the broader Israeli-Hezbollah confrontation that has been building for the past 8 months. This is breaking news analysis based on verified information. Subscribe now because what we are covering is still developing and the full scope may not be understood for days. Let us start with the timeline, because understanding how this attack unfolded is essential to understanding why Israeli defenses failed so completely. At 04:15 local time, 11 Israeli forward operating bases in southern Lebanon came under simultaneous rocket and artillery bombardment. These bases are positioned between 2 and 8 kilometers north of the Israeli-Lebanese border, established as part of Israel's ground incursion into Lebanese territory that began in September 2025. Each base houses between 30 and 80 soldiers. They are hardened positions with concrete bunkers, perimeter defenses, surveillance systems, and direct communications with Israeli command centers. They are supposed to provide early warning of Hezbollah movements and serve as firebase support for Israeli armored units operating deeper into Lebanese territory. The initial bombardment lasted approximately 8 minutes. It was not random fire. According to Israeli radio intercepts analyzed by regional security researchers, the bombardment targeted specific structures within each base using coordinates that indicate detailed prior reconnaissance. Command bunkers were hit, communications equipment was destroyed, vehicle depots were struck, and in at least 4 cases, ammunition storage facilities were ignited, creating secondary explosions that caused additional casualties and disabled defensive capabilities. At 04:23, while Israeli forces were still responding to the bombardment, Hezbollah ground assault teams emerged from concealed positions within 500 meters of each base. These were not large formations. Intelligence estimates suggest teams of 12 to 20 fighters per base, equipped with anti-tank missiles, automatic weapons, grenades, and explosive charges. They moved quickly, exploiting the confusion created by the bombardment, and they targeted Israeli soldiers who were evacuating damaged structures or attempting to man defensive positions. Subscribe if you are watching this and recognizing that this level of tactical coordination requires months of planning, detailed intelligence on Israeli positions, and combat proficiency that rivals professional military units. Now let us talk about what made this attack so devastating. Announcement number 1. Hezbollah had perfect intelligence on Israeli force dispositions, shift rotations, and defensive vulnerabilities. And this one matters more than anything else because it means Israeli operational security was completely compromised. The 11 bases attacked were not selected randomly. They were the bases with the highest troop concentrations at that specific hour. Israeli forces rotate personnel every 72 hours to manage fatigue during extended deployments. That rotation schedule is classified information. The fact that Hezbollah attacked during a window when all 11 bases had maximum personnel present means they had access to Israeli operational planning at a level that should be impossible. According to preliminary Israeli military investigations reported by Haaretz and confirmed by statements from defense officials, there is evidence that Hezbollah used signals intelligence to monitor Israeli communications, potentially including encrypted channels. There is also evidence of human intelligence penetration, meaning informants within Lebanese communities near Israeli positions, or potentially within Israeli military logistics networks. The precision of the attack is the evidence. Hezbollah knew which buildings housed command personnel. They knew where ammunition was stored. They knew which positions had recently installed reinforced bunkers and which had not. That level of detail does not come from satellite imagery or drone surveillance. It comes from human sources with access to Israeli planning documents or from technical collection of Israeli communications. Israel's military operates under the assumption that it maintains intelligence superiority over Hezbollah. That assumption just collapsed. If Hezbollah can obtain real-time information on Israeli force deployments, then every Israeli position in Lebanon is vulnerable, every rotation is potentially an opportunity for attack, and every operational plan is compromised before it is executed. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2. Hezbollah employed weapon systems that Israeli defenses were not configured to intercept. This is the part that Israeli military officials are calling a tactical surprise. The initial bombardment used a combination of weapons, standard Katyusha rockets which Israeli Iron Dome systems are designed to intercept, but also precision-guided missiles, likely Iranian Fighter 110 variants, which have smaller radar cross-sections and terminal guidance systems that make interception significantly more difficult. And also artillery shells fired from concealed positions within 3 to 5 kilometers of the targets, which are essentially impossible to intercept because their flight time is under 20 seconds. Iron Dome is optimized for intercepting rockets with flight times of 30 seconds or more, giving the system time to calculate trajectory, launch interceptors, and engage the target. Against artillery with sub-20-second flight times, Iron Dome cannot react fast enough. The shells arrive before the system completes its engagement cycle. Stay with me because this is where the technological asymmetry becomes critical and where Israeli defensive assumptions are being fundamentally challenged. Hezbollah also used anti-tank guided missiles in ways that Israeli forces did not anticipate. Normally, anti-tank missiles are used against vehicles, but Hezbollah used them against buildings, firing missiles through windows and doors to detonate inside command bunkers and barracks. The Cornet missiles Hezbollah possesses have tandem warheads designed to penetrate reactive armor. When used against concrete structures, they create devastating blast effects in enclosed spaces. Israeli forces train for ambushes against vehicles. They train for rocket attacks from a distance. They do not extensively train for close-quarters assaults on hardened positions by infantry teams using anti-tank missiles as bunker-busting weapons. That tactical innovation caught Israeli defenders in a scenario their doctrine did not prepare them for. According to statements from Israeli emergency medical services reported by the Times of Israel, the casualty profile is consistent with blast injuries in confined spaces and close-range automatic weapons fire. That means Israeli soldiers were killed inside bunkers that were supposed to protect them, and they were killed in close-range engagements, where Israeli surveillance and firepower advantages did not matter. Announcement number 3. Hezbollah withdrew successfully after the attack, suffering minimal casualties, which means Israeli response capabilities were slower than Hezbollah's operational tempo. Within 40 minutes of the initial bombardment, Israeli attack helicopters and drones were overhead. Israeli artillery began counter-battery fire against suspected Hezbollah launch positions. Israeli quick reaction forces mobilized from rear bases to reinforce the attack positions. But by the time those responses became effective, Hezbollah assault teams had already withdrawn. Hezbollah fighters did not attempt to hold the bases. They did not try to capture Israeli soldiers or seize equipment. They executed their attacks, inflicted maximum casualties, and retreated into concealed positions before Israeli reinforcements arrived. This is the operational pattern of a force that understands it cannot win a sustained engagement, but can win through speed, surprise, and disciplined withdrawal. Israeli military sources have confirmed, and I am quoting from a statement released by the IDF spokesperson at 0900 hours local time, that Hezbollah casualties from the attack are estimated at fewer than 30 fighters. That is a casualty exchange ratio of more than 17 to 1 in Hezbollah's favor. For context, conventional military doctrine considers any operation that achieves better than 3 to 1 casualty ratios to be highly successful. 17 to 1 is extraordinary. The reason Hezbollah achieved this ratio is the same reason guerrilla forces throughout history have succeeded against technologically superior enemies. They chose the time, the place, and the method of engagement. They exploited Israeli vulnerabilities, and they withdrew before Israeli advantages in firepower and mobility could be brought to bear. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let us talk about what this attack reveals about the broader strategic situation, because there are 2 narratives being constructed right now, and only one of them is accurate. The first narrative, the one Israeli officials are promoting, is that this attack was a desperate move by Hezbollah in response to Israeli operational success in Lebanon. Israel has been degrading Hezbollah capabilities for months. Hezbollah launched this attack as a last attempt to inflict casualties and shift momentum. The attack will not change the overall trajectory of the conflict. Israel will continue its operations and ultimately achieve its objectives. The second narrative, the one supported by the tactical evidence, is that Hezbollah has been preparing this attack for months, that it represents a deliberate escalation designed to impose unsustainable costs on Israeli ground operations, and that it signals Hezbollah's assessment that Israel cannot maintain its current level of military deployment in Lebanon without suffering casualties that Israeli society will not accept. I believe the second narrative is correct. This attack was not improvised. It was meticulously planned. The intelligence preparation, the weapons selection, the coordination across 11 simultaneous targets, the successful withdrawal, all of these elements indicate a long planning cycle and a high level of operational sophistication. Hezbollah's objective was not to destroy Israeli forces completely. It was to demonstrate that Israeli soldiers in Lebanon are vulnerable, that Israeli defensive systems have exploitable weaknesses, and that continued Israeli presence will result in regular mass casualty events. This is psychological warfare as much as it is military action. Hezbollah is targeting Israeli political will, not just Israeli military capacity. The Israeli government is now facing a decision. It can withdraw from southern Lebanon, accepting that its ground incursion failed to achieve security objectives and that the cost in lives is too high, or it can reinforce its positions, commit additional troops, and attempt to establish a security zone large enough that Hezbollah cannot repeat this type of attack. Both options have severe political costs. Withdrawal means admitting that Hezbollah cannot be defeated militarily, that Israeli deterrence has failed, and that the families of the 535 soldiers who died today will demand accountability from political and military leaders who promised a quick, low-casualty operation. That political cost could bring down the government. Reinforcement means committing potentially tens of thousands of additional soldiers to an open-ended occupation of southern Lebanon, sustaining casualties over months or years, and diverting resources from other security priorities, including the West Bank, and potential confrontations with Iran. That strategic cost could leave Israel vulnerable in multiple theaters simultaneously. Think carefully about what this represents. When a non-state actor inflicts 535 military casualties in a single day against a state with one of the most capable militaries in the world, that is not a tactical setback. That is a strategic problem, and there is no easy solution. If you are an Israeli citizen or have family in Israel, what happened today is not just a military story. It is a question about how many soldiers' lives the government is willing to spend pursuing objectives in Lebanon. If you are watching regional dynamics, this attack shifts the balance of deterrence significantly in Hezbollah's favor. And if you are tracking broader Middle East conflicts, this demonstrates that advanced weapons, intelligence capabilities, and air superiority do not guarantee success against determined, well-trained adversaries fighting on terrain they know intimately. This pattern has repeated throughout military history, and the outcome is almost always the same. Let me take you back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in December 1979. The Soviet Union believed its superior firepower, armor, and air support would quickly defeat Afghan resistance fighters. The Soviets controlled major cities and roads. They established fortified bases throughout the country. They conducted regular offensive operations against Mujahideen positions. But the Mujahideen used ambushes, mines, and hit-and-run attacks to inflict steady casualties on Soviet forces. They avoided direct confrontations where Soviet advantages in firepower would matter. They attacked Soviet supply convoys, isolated outposts, and poorly defended positions, and over 10 years they killed over 15,000 Soviet soldiers, wounded many more, and ultimately forced Soviet withdrawal. The parallel is clear. Israel has overwhelming firepower and technological superiority, but Hezbollah is not fighting a conventional war where those advantages determine outcomes. Hezbollah is fighting an attrition campaign where every Israeli casualty has political significance far beyond its tactical impact. And today, Hezbollah demonstrated that it can inflict mass casualties when it chooses to do so. So where does this leave us? Let me give you three possible paths, because Israel's response to this attack will determine whether this conflict expands, stabilizes, or ends. Path 1. Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon within 30 days. Political pressure from casualty-averse Israeli society forces the government to end the ground incursion. Israel returns to a defensive posture along the border and relies on airstrikes and intelligence operations rather than ground presence. This path requires Israeli leaders to accept that they cannot achieve their stated objectives militarily. I assess this as approximately 25% likely. It is politically difficult but strategically sound. Path 2. Israeli reinforcement and expansion of operations. Israel commits additional brigades to southern Lebanon, attempts to push Hezbollah back beyond rocket range of Israeli cities, and accepts that casualties will continue, but believes they can be sustained if they lead to eventual victory. This path risks prolonged occupation, regular attacks like today's, and increasing international pressure for ceasefire. I assess this as 40% likely. It matches Israeli historical patterns of responding to attacks with escalation. Path 3. Negotiated ceasefire within 60 days mediated by international actors. The shock of today's casualties creates diplomatic space for third-party mediation. The United States, France, or potentially China brokers an agreement where Israel withdraws in exchange for Hezbollah commitments to remain north of the Litani River and international monitoring forces to separate the combatants. This path allows both sides to claim partial victories while ending an unsustainable military situation. I assess this as 35% likely. It requires both sides to prioritize stability over maximalist demands. I think Path 2 is most likely in the immediate term, but it will evolve into Path 3 within 3 to 6 months as casualties accumulate and political sustainability erodes. Israeli governments typically respond to major attacks with military escalation before eventually accepting negotiated outcomes when those escalations fail to achieve decisive results. The real question is not what happens in the next week. The real question is whether Israel can sustain military operations in Lebanon at acceptable cost, or whether Hezbollah has found a formula for imposing costs that Israeli society will not tolerate indefinitely. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, how many casualties can Israel sustain before political support for the Lebanon operation collapses? Second, can Israeli intelligence identify and neutralize the sources that are providing Hezbollah with detailed operational information? Third, what does regional security look like if Hezbollah successfully demonstrates that it can defeat Israeli ground forces through attrition? Tell me in the comments what you think Israel does next. Tell me if you believe this attack changes the trajectory of the conflict, or if you think it is an anomaly. We will continue tracking every development from southern Lebanon, monitoring Israeli political responses, and analyzing Hezbollah's strategic calculations. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with anyone trying to understand the significance of what just happened and what it means for the future of Israeli-Lebanese relations. Turn on notifications so you do not miss updates as this situation develops, and we will see you in the next analysis.